I guess sort of brings me to my next question, which is sort of the elephant in the room of the entire crypto industry, which is regulation. And I'd just love to hear your thoughts about what, in your view, is good regulation and what, in your view, is over-regulation, right? Because as you just said, we don't want to sort of stifle innovation, but regulation is here and there's no avoiding it. And I know Binance is trying to work with regulators. So can you I'd love to hear just some detail from you about what kind of regulation you think would be good for the industry and where do regulators cross the line in actually stamping out innovation?
Sure. So again, regulation is not one thing. And there's many different types of regulations, and there's many different stances, and there's many different countries. So good regulation should be good for the crypto industry. Mm-hmm. Bad regulation should be bad. And what does good regulation look like? Number one is we should recognize the classification of cryptocurrencies, and it's not just one class. Many people make the mistake of, is it assets, or is it commodities, is it currency, is it security? But guess what? In the early days of the internet, people always asked, is internet a radio, a TV, a magazine? What is it? But guess what? There's internet TV, internet radio, internet magazine, and social media, and a bunch of other things. So it's very important to recognize that blockchain crypto is more than one asset type. Mm-hmm. So let's not put all of the different cryptocurrencies in one bucket. And so in a large country like US, where there's many different regulators, I don't know if they should be regulated by one regulator, or if everything fits into one existing bucket. Or in most countries, we actually recommend setting up a new regulator to regulate this industry, which, like, for example, Dubai have done. Mm-hmm. And then the other, classification is very important. And then if you look at the businesses in this industry, most people focus on the exchange, centralized exchanges. What should we allow and not allow? What level of, KYC, AML is very important, but what about the other aspects? Listing frameworks, customer support, customer dispute resolution. So all of these things could be regulated in some way that hopefully makes sense. And then there's many other new areas, which I think the new areas we should adopt a relaxed approach to regulation first and see how the industry grow. So different countries have different stances. For example, I talked with the president of El Salvador, and we talked about listing frameworks. His view is like, we shouldn't regulate that. We should let if you list bad coins, people are not going to use your platform. So the market will have a self-selecting, self-regulatory aspect to it. So we're still figuring this out. I do believe that we need some level of regulation in the world for this to work. There are many scammers. There are many bad players in this industry. So we should try to push those out. And we need to work with the regulators. We need to work with law enforcement. But it's not black and white. To be honest, today I don't think anybody knows what the perfect regulation should be. So this is why we're working with multiple countries in multiple areas, and they all have slightly different regulations. Let's see which one works better, and then eventually through time, people will copy the ones that work better, and we'll kind of converge into one.
But I'm curious to hear what you think is bad regulation, right? Because Binance, in its early days, it really embodied this. I mean, it still does, but it especially embodied the spirit of crypto. It's like, you were just sort of the citizen of the earth. You had no bank account, but Binance was everywhere. And now, you're having to work more with specific regulatory frameworks in specific countries, right? So the question is obviously KYC is necessary to a certain degree for money laundering, but some would argue that with some centralized exchanges, it's almost like opening a bank account, right? I mean, it's a very similar process. So the question is when does regulation go so far that crypto kind of stops being cool and different? It's just kind of like, okay, here I'm just opening a bank account. I'm working through a centralized exchange. They have all this information about me. They know, and we're seeing more and more suggestions like that. So where do you draw the line and preserve the unique spirit of crypto that I know you've been fighting for years?
Sure. So I think we want to give more options, and we want to, there's a few things. Number one is we want to give options to the user. Just because the centralized exchange is heavily regulated and requires KYC, AML, and all of this stuff, doesn't mean that we take any way away from the decentralized world. You can still use your own wallet. You can still have your own Bitcoin wallet, your Ethereum wallet, your BNB wallet, and use DeFi and whatever. You still have that choice. We didn't take that choice away. We just made the centralized exchange more regulated. And for centralized exchanges, I view that we have one strong responsibility for us is to integrate with existing financial markets. So that means working with banks, working with payment service providers, so that we can bring the mass users into crypto. So for that, we do need to be a regulated entity in most places we operate. So we have to bridge that gap, and then further from us will be the decentralized world. So and I'm still a world citizen. I'm still traveling quite heavily. I still personally do not use a bank much at all. I do have a bank account, but I don't use it at all. So I think just because a group of businesses, centralized exchanges gets regulated, doesn't mean that we remove the ethos of decentralization. So in a decentralized world, there will be pockets of people that, well, people should be free to do whatever they want. And certain businesses choose to be regulated, certain businesses choose not to be. So yeah, so that's kind of my view. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the role of exchanges in regulation, like to what degree the industry should police itself. So I know there's some controversy about this. For example, the tokens that exchanges choose to list. Now, if I understand correctly, I think your attitude is kind of like list them and let the market sort it out, right? I think that's fairly what Binance does. No? Okay, well, you could correct me in a second. But let's, for example, like Luna 2, right? You guys got some heat for Luna 2. You know, Luna 2 was sort of like, UST collapse, and then they were like, a few days later, they were like, hey, here's round 2. And some people criticized Binance for being involved with that. So I guess, like what role do exchanges have in deciding, like, okay, this token doesn't seem safe, or this token seems like it might collapse, or this token's going to lose people a lot of money? Should they just list them and let it sort itself out, or should exchanges play a more proactive role in kind of protecting investors?
So I think centralized exchanges definitely have a role of due diligence on the projects they list. So that's the approach we take, and we look at projects very closely before we list them. But at the same time, we list a decent number of projects. We list 400-something projects on our platform. It's not the highest. Most people think of Binance as the highest number, but other exchanges list 2,000, 3,000 coins, which we don't do. So we do go through a level of due diligence. To be honest, UST Luna was a pretty decent project before it collapsed. It's very popular.
They often are, yeah.
Yeah. So and the way if you look at how Luna collapsed, it's not like the founder took the money and ran away. It's not quite a scam. It's a failure. It's a massive failure. So even before it crashed completely, they spent $3 billion worth of their reserves trying to recover it. They bought at a very low price. Of course, at that point, it's already hopeless. So it's not quite what we call a scam, but it's definitely a catastrophic failure. So, and then Luna 2. So we already have a large number of users holding Luna. And when Luna converts to Luna 2, do we support it or not? Cutting it off at that time actually causes much more harm to our users. So it's not a new token listing in our perspective. It's just facilitating the transition for our users. So we as an exchange also have to consider what our majority of our users want. So we always go by user numbers. So if a coin is used by a large number of users, we tend to think that that coin has utility value. So that's our number one criteria. So we do have to apply a level of judgment for sure. We can't just list any coin under the sun, and that exchanges that do that does not survive.
So I just want to turn to China for a moment, just because that's where Binance started. Binance started in Shanghai, sort of saw the writing on the wall, moved internationally. You're still very much a celebrity in China. I've never been to like a Chinese blockchain gathering where your name has not come up. People are very much following you. So here's the question about China, because I think it's like kind of a larger philosophical question. There's sort of this ethos in crypto that no government can shut crypto down. And I totally believe that. That's true. There is still crypto trade in China. But there's no question that it's not what it once was, right? China was the center of the crypto world, the absolute center. And now it's like just not, right? I mean, I think we don't have really good data, but it's clear that the level of trade in China is not what it was a few years ago before the Chinese government cracked down. So I guess my question for you is like, how do you see the Chinese market? I mean, do you see it as coming back? Do you think, is it still going to be a player? Do you think the Chinese government will change its position? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I'm just curious because it's such an important market. And again, you started there.
Sure. Yeah, I'm actually glad you brought this topic up. This is a common misconception, by a lot of people. Many people think Binance is a Chinese exchange, which is not. I'm Chinese by blood. Both of my parents are Chinese. I was born to parents, to Chinese parents. I moved to Canada when I was 12. I've been a Canadian for 30 plus years. I don't hold a Chinese passport. I do speak Chinese, the language, and I have spent 10 years in my adult life in Shanghai, sort of doing business. So I do have a view there. So I want to get that out there very, very clearly. Like Binance itself is not a Chinese company at all. We're not affiliate. We're not affiliated with the Chinese government in any way. There's a lot of conspiracy theories around that. So I want to use this opportunity to clarify that to the extent I can. On the China market, and also I want to say that I'm a decent celebrity even in U.S. Crypto conferences, for example, even in consensus. So I don't want to be too arrogant, but I'm humbled that people do invite us. But I think Binance do have an influence globally. On China, I don't think the policies will change anytime soon. I think China's kind of fairly restrictive compared to like 10, 20 years ago as a business environment. There's a lot of talks about central planning, common prosperity. All of these things are things we tried in the 1970s that didn't work out so well. So I don't see that changing anytime soon because the Chinese leadership structure is set for life. So I don't think that will change anytime soon. So this is why I'm pessimistic. We put out of China 5 years ago. So and some of my friends were telling me that recently, like how did you see that 5 years ago that you guys just put out completely? So look, we kind of saw certain signs before it. So I don't think the bans on crypto exchanges, ICOs, and mining in China will be lifted anytime soon. But because of this, it doesn't mean that those activities completely stop. China has a history of things moving underground when there's regulation prevented. So I think there's still a lot of P2P trading. There's still a lot of mining going on. ICOs not so much, but a lot of talent moved to other parts of Asia, even in the US to do ICOs, etc. So people are very mobile these days. So in the blockchain in our industry, you can work from anywhere. All you need is an internet connection. So we see a lot of that happening already. So I know a lot of people who moved to Southeast Asia, America, Europe. So yes, it's sad to see that's happening, but it didn't really stop Bitcoin mining. It had a little dent on Bitcoin mining, but Bitcoin mining hash rate is already at all-time high again. So we see that this kind of things doesn't affect the crypto industry that much.
But I guess just the sort of, and thank you for clarifying everything about China, but just the larger question here, though, is like in the crypto industry, there's a saying like, no government can stop Bitcoin, right? And it's true, as you just said, China did not stop Bitcoin. But I think they accomplished one of their goals, which is just making it a lot harder, right? It's a lot harder to access, crypto trade in China than it was before. And is that just something that concerns you just about government's powers to do that? Because it does seem that to some degree, China successfully just kind of like raised the threshold for getting into crypto.
So I think China's a pretty good case study for this. So China was successful doing this to the internet. So they blocked Facebook, Google, Twitter, all the external platforms, and they let the homegrown versions of it grow. And it was quite successful. There's Tencent, Alibaba, etc. And then in the crypto space, I think they're doing the same thing. Or at least it looks like they're trying to do the same thing, which is block Bitcoin, make Bitcoin very hard to access, Ethereum very hard to access, block the centralized exchanges, and then push the central bank digital currency. But here, I think there are some fundamental differences between the central bank digital currencies to native cryptocurrencies in terms of limited supply, permission of transactions, and probably ease of use of fees. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm not sure exactly that strategy will work. It may not. I'm somewhat skeptical about that strategy, to be very frank. So we still see quite a bit of crypto activity in China, but now it's just very hidden. There's no way to collect data because the Chinese also blocked our website. So we don't see any Chinese IP addresses coming to our website. So the data is very hard to collect now.
So turning back to the U.S., have to ask you this question. There are reports of the SEC investigating BNB. Just curious what your response is to that.
So the SEC did not make an official announcement. We did not make any official announcements. We do communicate with every single regulator in the US and also globally. So we do get questions from them from time to time. So I'll give you an example, right? 3 years ago, there was an article first saying that Binance office got raided by the police. And then all the other media copied the headline. And then 3 days later, that original article was changed to some government official visited the Binance office. Those are very, very different things. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what the media knows or not, or don't know that. But we have been collaborating with regulatory bodies and regulatory agencies very fully. And I strongly believe that we obviously strongly believe BNB is not a security. We have very strong legal opinions on that as well. So I don't think that's a risk for us.
Interesting. And then, just turning back to sort of the larger like crypto winter, a lot of exchanges such as Coinbase are either like freezing hiring. There was actually reports of CoinDesk rescinding offers that they already made. But it's not just a Coinbase, but there's not just Coinbase. It's exchanges all over the world. What about Binance? How are you concerned at all about faring this crypto winter?
So I think it's not the first time we went through a crypto winter. If we're in a crypto winter or going through a crypto winter, this will be personally my third, Binance's second. So it's not the first time we went through this. And Binance has always been very frugal on large spendings. We didn't sponsor Super Bowl. We didn't buy stadium rights. So we have a very healthy war chest. We in fact are expanding hiring right now. Right now it's much better to hire because during bull markets, everyone starting their own project and everyone's paying everyone's ridiculous amount of compensation. So now the market is more balanced. There's top talent that's available and we want to hire them. We're increasing our hiring. We're increasing our M&A activity. We want to do more mergers and acquisitions and investments. And to the point where we also actually want to lower our fees right now. So we have a decent war chest. So I think now over the next couple of years, if we are in a crypto winter, we will leverage that. We will use that to the max.
So that's interesting. So Binance will be growing as other exchanges might be contracting. Binance is also involved in some sort of other interesting deals. For example, looking at Forbes getting involved in media, Twitter. Can you talk a little bit about that? What the motivation is behind that?
Sure. So for the last 3.5, 4 years, we've been investing very heavily in crypto in the blockchain industry, and that has done really, really well. And so we're venturing outside a little bit further outside of the blockchain industry. The idea is to in each sector look for 1 or 2 good targets and invest in them and become minority shareholders, and then help them to come into Web3, integrate with blockchain, accept crypto payments, do micropayments per article, issue NFTs, gamify, all this stuff. So hopefully, by integrating with blockchain, you should give them new business models that wasn't available to them or their peers before. And if that's successful, that will make them financially stronger. And you will force all their peers to change their business models to integrate with blockchain as well. And if we can do this with every economic sector, then those guys come in, we enlarge the crypto industry. So we're now doing with media, social media, gaming, e-commerce, a number of other industries. So we're actually kicking up into higher gear in terms of M&A activity now.
Interesting. So we don't have too much time left. I just want to make sure you get to say everything you want to say. I mean, you clarified some of the, as you're right, there is a common misconception about Binance in China. What are just some other things you feel like people don't get about Binance or get wrong about Binance? I'd like to, give you the opportunity to, set the record straight if there's anything.
Sure. The other thing where people very commonly have a misconception about Binance or myself is they think I do everything in Binance, and they come to pitch projects to me. They come ask me for listings, this and that. But in reality, I actually don't do very much in Binance. We have a very strong team that does everything else. So when people come to me, I'm really more like a router. I just usually write somebody to our team. We have a very strong team now, and Binance, well, we have a strong presence in the US. Binance US has like 44 state licenses, and the last 6 they got in the last few months. So they're progressing on that. We're getting a lot more Binance.com, the international exchange, is getting more licenses as well over the last 6 months. We got 5 or 6 different licenses, including France, Italy, Dubai, Bahrain. So we are moving into this heavily regulated space.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So many people still have the misconception that Binance is like the Wild West exchange, and many people even have the worst conception of thinking that's the way how we become successful. I can tell you that's not. No one will deposit their crypto into a Wild West exchange. People only deposit crypto into exchange they trust. So so we have worked really hard to earn people's trust, and there's just a lot of misconception out there by the traditional media who doesn't really understand our industry yet. But I'm sure with time, their involvement and understanding will become better.
Just one real final question, and then we have to wrap up. What's your advice for the crypto industry? What could the crypto industry be doing better? Anything, last words?
Sure. I think we need to educate and do risk education, risk warning, risk management much better. In a new industry, there's a lot of risks. So on that front, I encourage all the players to spend much more resources on education efforts and also warning investors about risks. That's something that you will see Binance do much heavily going forward. I think we probably have not done enough in the past, and going forward, we'll do that a lot more.
Do your own research. Thank you, CZ. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you so much, Emily.